Britain's Prime Minister Theresa May says she's keeping a close eye on how Brexit may affect local businesses. She's touring the country with assurances of a smooth transition out of the 27-member economic bloc.
I believe that we can negotiate a good agreement which is tariff-free and as frictionless trade as possible, so we maintain those markets in the EU, but also that we open up markets around the rest of the world. Brexit provides us with opportunities.
But the UK is the world's slowest growing major economy, and even some Brexiteers are now voicing concerns. In the border town of Dover, businesses expect more red tape and higher costs.
We have a tremendously successful port, 1.25 million trucks a year going through Dover. Unless we have it unrestricted access both ways, we're going to end up with traffic jams as far as Maidstone all the way through Kent and in northern France.
Others say the benefits of Brexit aren't materialising.
I feel like a lot of people were motivated by sort of the immigration side of things, obviously being near the port. They thought that that meant that people weren't going to be allowed in and then that would give them more opportunities for jobs. But, I mean, it hasn't changed.
That's partly because the EU says it won't negotiate any post-Brexit deals until the UK completes its exit from the bloc. And it wants workable solutions for the Northern Irish border and the rights of EU citizens living in the UK before it signs off on the final deal.
We have reached an agreement on the transition period, which was agreed upon in principle at the European Council in December. The transition will be of limited duration, as requested by both the British government and the European Union.
May believes the extended implementation period gives businesses enough time to adapt.
It's so important that we've got the agreement from the rest of the European Union to what's called this implementation period until December 2020. That gives people certainty, it gives businesses certainty, it gives farmers certainty.
Yet there's little doubt life outside the EU will bring a new set of challenges for Britain's already sluggish economy. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Let's break down the Brexit process in more detail now. Joining me from London is Vicky Pryce. She's the Chief Economic Advisor at the consultancy firm, the Centre for Economics and Business Research. Also joining us from London is Robert Oulds, who's the Director of the Bruges Group think tank. Welcome back to Money Talks to you both. Great to see you both again. Vicky, I want to start with you, if I may. With a year to go, the UK's economy looks like it has slowed down, but it's not nearly as bad as some of the doomsayers had said prior to the Brexit vote. But so even without a trade deal in place, might the UK do better than expected outside of the customs union and the single market?
What has been going on so far is that indeed the economy has been sustained by a very sharp increase in world trade. So what's going on is right this minute is that the world economy is growing quite significantly, and we benefited from that. We should in theory have benefited from that considerably more. As it is, we're right at the bottom of the G7 nations and not doing very well against the rest of the G20. I've just been hearing about how well Turkey is doing, for example. What has sustained the economy, in addition to strong manufacturing exports because of that world trade growth, has been the fall in the pound that we saw after the referendum. And in addition, very significantly, huge quantities of money that have been pushed into the economy by the Bank of England. So liquidity has expanded very significantly. Lending to consumers and to businesses has been sustained. In fact, for consumers, is getting back to sort of record levels. And that is really what has done it. The worry is that if any of that now slows down in terms of its impact, then the economy itself is unlikely to do well. OK,
let me give you another data point, if I may. A recent Reuters survey showed that banks in the City of London are looking to shift out about 5,000 banking jobs to the EU. That's about half of what they were predicting just 6 months ago. Isn't that also a sign of confidence that the government is handling Brexit reasonably well?
Well, look, the City of London will remain a major financial centre. What is happening is that banks are already establishing various outlets in continental Europe so that they can actually continue to do business without any friction at all. They're not doing it in huge numbers yet in terms of people, but what is happening is that they are recruiting. When they are expanding, they're recruiting in Europe. And what we've seen just recently, just in the last few days, is that the mood in the financial sector is one of the worst we've seen since the financial crisis. In fact, optimism has fallen for the last 9 quarters, which is the worst that we've seen since 2008.
OK, Robert, let's bring you in. How optimistic, since we are talking about optimism, how optimistic are you that the government is going to be able to reach some sort of a framework trade deal with the EU before Brexit Day? Or do you believe that Britain doesn't really need one anyway?
Well, this isn't just about a question of trade. Britain's future in the world isn't determined just by whether we can have a trade agreement with the European Union or not. The Brexit vote was a vote to take back control, where British people would be making laws themselves or having elected representatives they can elect and dismiss themselves running our lives, rather than the unaccountable institutions of the European Union. That was the key issue, and that remains the issue in the country, and most people are still behind Brexit. In fact, support for Brexit has gone up, and there will be an agreement between Britain and the European Union when we leave in 1 year's time, and that will last for a couple of years, and then there will be further agreements with the European Union, and Britain will be forging new trade links around the world, as well as still having access to markets within the European Union. And I'm really pleased that Vicky, from previous debates that I've had with her on this show, where Vicky was less optimistic about Britain's economy as the result of the vote to leave the European Union, Vicky is now a lot more positive. And thank you very much. I'm very pleased that we can now realise that Project Fear was just a fear story, just a scare story, and the economic Armageddon that was facing us hasn't materialised. It will not be materialising. We will do very well outside of the European Union, as Vicky is beginning to learn. So thank you. Unfortunately, we wasted a lot of time debating issues to do with how the economy would fall apart. It's not going to. Unemployment is down. Our current account deficit is reducing, trade is up. Yeah. We are taking advantage of the fact that the IMF says that 90% of global growth will be outside of the EU. Okay. That's what we need to take advantage of, and we need to get out the EU to do that.
All that notwithstanding, though, Robert, the UK remains a trading nation, and trade forms a very big part of what the UK does. Let me quote what you said to the Express newspaper recently. I think it was in September. You said there is a quiet revolution happening with the countries left in the EU. Countries like Poland and Hungary are standing up for themselves, and they're looking towards Britain and Brexit. And you said that Ireland, Denmark, Lithuania and Sweden could be next to leave the bloc. You are basically talking about the dissolution of Britain's largest trading partner. Are you confident that the UK can survive if the European Union completely dissolves away?
Well, if the European Union goes away, what that would mean is that countries in the EU would no longer be run by the European Commission and the European Court of Justice, based in Brussels and Luxembourg, retrospectively. They are governing the lives of countries in the EU, just as Britain was governed, and they would do a lot better off outside of the European Union. That's possibly a long way down the line, but what we're seeing, although no country has a majority for leaving as yet, but neither did Britain until relatively recently. Okay. There is a growing opposition to government from Brussels and, of course, from Frankfurt. And we see how, in the continent, unemployment is so high, a lot higher than in the UK. Robert, because they've got the euro, they have austerity programmes that have caused utter harm.
I hear you, Robert. I want to move on to the issue of Ireland, if I may. Vicky, let me bring you back in. Many people on both sides of the border are still concerned about all the possible permutations that may happen. It could be a hard border on the island itself. It could be a hard border out in the Irish Sea. We don't know yet. What solutions do you propose for the Irish issue?
Well, the best solution is to stay in the customs union, of course, and it would be even better if we could also stay in the single market, if the Europeans sort of let us do that and we make enough concessions. I think it is worth just answering what Robert said in terms of the economy. We haven't, of course, left yet, and that is why we're doing all those negotiations at present to get to the best possible position that we can.
We were told that if we voted to leave the next day, we'd have
Robert, let Vicky finish, if we may.
One of the things that businesses have been asking for has been to stay in the customs union and, if possible, also be able to not have any non-tariff barriers, because they realise now that even though there have been concerns about the way in which the European Commission in particular works, in reality it's a much better situation than having to get into uncharted waters and not actually knowing what's going to happen in terms of the rest of the world in trade. But the Northern Ireland issue is so hugely important that I think, if anything, results in fact, some of the things that businesses want to see happening, it will be the attempt to have no border in Northern Ireland, which really would only happen if we're able to be in the customs union.
OK, Vicky Pryce and Robert Oulds, thank you both very much indeed.